It's okay by me.
Great, thank you. I'll just wait 1 second, and I'll also share this presentation that we're going to be looking at. Okay. Great. So welcome, everybody. I'm glad we're a small group. That means that we can get more out of this space and really talk to each other a lot. Let me just put here in presentation mode. Okay. So the idea of this conversation hour is that I can briefly go over the reporting process for the Wikimedia funds, particularly the General Support Fund. So those of you who applied for the like what was before the annual funds, in the new process, the General Support Fund. But also, if anybody has rapid funds, then I can also talk about the reporting that we will be doing as grantee partners. Please stop me at any point if you have any questions, if there's anything that is unclear, or you would like to make a comment. So the idea is that this is interactive and not only me speaking. I will take probably about 20 minutes, and then we'll open the rest of the time just for talking and conversation and any doubts that you might have. And this is a learning process for all of us. This is going to be very much an experiment. So we don't have all the answers, maybe, to your questions, but we will think them through together and maybe come up with some answers. Okay. I didn't present myself. My name is Jessica. I work with the Wikimedia Foundation in the Community Resources team. So you all come from the MEA region. Jacqueline has also joined us from the ISEAP region. She's my colleague at the Community Resources team. You all know Veronica well. She's another colleague. And my role is to focus on learning and evaluation, and to work with you to find the best way to learn from your work, to share that learning with others, and to be able to build the knowledge together. So I welcome Jacqueline. So first of all, I'm really glad that you came. This is the first session we're doing on reporting, so I hope to learn with you and from the questions you're going to ask. As I mentioned, like, we're really learning together. This is a new reporting system. So many of you have accessed grants in the past. You've done your reporting through Meta. You've had a lot of flexibility of how long to make that report, what questions you're going to answer, how much information you want to put in. And what we're trying to do now, as we did with the application process on the Flux portal, is to structure that reporting. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes. Welcome to people who are arriving. To structure that reporting in a way. Hi, Kimo. Welcome. I'm just doing a brief introduction into the reporting, and then the idea is to open conversation to questions, comments, and thinking together. So we've just got started. So I was explaining that the idea now is for the reporting, as the application process is to be on Flux. That will allow us reporting that is hopefully not so much of work for you, not so much of a burden, to do a long report that maybe few people will read, but it takes a lot of your work, and to actually focus on registering the key learning that you think is important, and that we can share that with other people. So that is the focus of these reports, and that's why we've called them learning reports. They're not evaluation reports. It's not something that you're going to do just to tick a box and get the payment, or just to do something that the foundation is requiring you to do. These reports have to be useful for you. If they're not useful for you, we need to change them. So they need to work so that you can learn as teams, as organizations, about the work that you're doing, and find ways of sharing that knowledge. It's also a way for us to identify, especially when you do your midterm report, what are the areas in which the foundation can support you more. So for example, you are doing programmatic work in education or GLAM, and you're facing some difficulties or some challenges. We can identify that in the midterm report, and we can come in and support you. Or you've identified something really interesting and important, and you want to share with others. We want to do that as you're implementing your work, so that we can make this a live and ongoing learning and sharing process. And it's also so regional committees can get to know more about your work. This has been something that you as grantees have said a lot. We want regional committees to really know the work that we're doing. So when they're evaluating our proposals in a year's time, they can really understand some of our, hi Kimo again, they can understand what our organization is about, what are the challenges we're facing, why we need this funding, why is it important. So the reports are not for the regional committees to evaluate your work and be the basis for future decision making. It's so that they can know your work better and they can discuss that work with you. So those are the key principles of this learning report, and why you're going to see some of how we're asking some of the questions and how we hope you will register those answers is maybe different to the past, where you talked a lot about like all the activities you did, all the details of each one of the operational aspects. We want you now to really focus on what did we learn from this? What worked well? What approaches do we think we need to change? What do we need to address as challenges or problems in the next months of our implementation? So I'm just going to give you, sorry, I shared the presentation in the chat. I'll just do that again for those who joined a bit later, so you can follow it here. I'm hoping everybody got access. Is that true? If you can just let me know. Okay, I assume you all have access. Great, thanks, Douglas. So where you can find the information, and here I'm going to go on to the Meta page to show you where it is. As we know, Meta is sometimes very confusing, especially for me. So if you go on to this, this link in the Meta page, you're going to find all the application forms. And here you'll find the reporting forms. So here we have the template for the midterm report, the program officer's conversation. I'll explain these in a moment. The final report or yearly report for those of you who have multi-year funding, and the program officer final conversation. So here you'll find we're currently translating them to different languages. Today they're in English. As we did with the application form, what you can do is you can copy that template, make your own version. You can work on your report, and then you can put it onto Flux when you're ready. The Flux format is very similar to the application. It's fields that you fill out, some of them open, some of them with multiple choice. And that is how you will submit your report. On your grantee card in Influx, you should be able to see your report template and when it's due. We're also going to be sharing a small tutorial to help guide you if you can't find that report template on your Flux grantee card. So this is the main area where in Meta where you can find the reporting templates. But we also have this link to a small explanation of which report you need to fill out, depending on the type of fund you have. So most of you here are general support grantee partners. You will be doing a midterm report, and that's halfway through your grant project. So each project will be different. For a year project, it will be 6 months. For smaller projects, whenever the halfway point is. You will be doing a midterm conversation. So I'm going to explain what this looks like in a bit more detail. But basically, after every report, the program officers are going to review that report. And rather than just give you some written feedback or no feedback at all, as it sometimes happens, they are going to 2 weeks after the report is submitted and analyzed, they're going to invite you to a conversation, a 40-minute conversation where you can talk about what you've learned and you can discuss a bit more some of those findings. And the same thing happens after the final year report. So when you finished your implementation period, you will have 1 month to submit the report. And again, the program officer will invite you for a call to discuss that final report. For if there are any multi-year grantee partners on the call, you will not be submitting a midterm report. So that format you don't need to look at. You will be submitting yearly reports. And that yearly report will also have afterwards a conversation. So are there any questions until now before I go into actually looking at the formats and explaining some of the questions? Just you can raise your hand if you have any questions. Okay, I'll keep going and then we'll leave them to maybe after I've explained the reports. There's also a space on the page, the meta page, which gives you some general information. Is this required? Who is responsible for this? When does this happen? How will it be used? Where will we fill it out? Will it be published on Meta? The important thing here to say is, as I mentioned, this will be used for learning, not to evaluate or judge your work. And it will also be used to help us gather data to show how we're doing in some of those metrics that you've proposed. Before, when you would report on Meta, there was a lot of information, a lot of metric tables, dashboards, but we never could take all that information for all grantees and be able to show a full picture of what we're doing in the region or what we're doing in each thematic area or in the world. So the idea of doing this on Flux and having spaces to put in those metrics is that we can aggregate that data and show it to you so that we can analyze together. And it will be, the reports will be published on Meta. They will be open as the application proposals were to any community member. What will not be published on Meta is the conversation you have with program officers, as it's a more intimate conversation where you can maybe discuss some things that are not needed to go on Meta. So that is the summary. I am now going to go into explaining a bit about the reporting format in itself. And I'm going to focus on the midterm report because this is the report that's closer to you at this moment. And we will have future conversation hours to talk about the final report. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, you can go on to this link directly on your computers or phones, but I'm also going to share it here. Is the visualization okay? Is that big enough? It looks okay, I think.
Yeah, it works for me.
Yeah, okay. So the report is going to have 4 parts. Here's a summary of what I am saying. What is the purpose of the report? Some questions you might be asking. So I really invite you to take the time to read this initial information, because this has come from some questions that grantees have already asked. You know, if the spaces are limited, how am I going to really tell the story of all my work? And we explain that the spaces are limited precisely so that we can capture the information that is key in the best way, but you can annex any information that you want, videos, other documents, dashboard links, anything that supports your main learning report. But we do want the information to be very precise so that we can capture and aggregate that information. So the first question is around understanding your work. So, you know, describe how your strategies and activities were implemented. Is there anything that you had to change that was worth highlighting? I've included here some tips, so some things that you can think about as you answer this question. For example, don't go into all the operational detail about your work, but to focus on what are the key methodologies or approaches that you're implementing, how have they worked, what has not worked. Then we go on to look at understanding a bit more what is being most effective in achieving your goals. Are you trying anything new, or are you expanding things that are already been effective and they're showing good results? What are the obstacles? As you all know, we learn sometimes more from the problems or the failures or things that don't work out well. What have you encountered? How are you addressing these or not? And this is, again, for us to identify how we can support you, either the foundation, but also how we can bring other peers who are maybe facing similar challenges and are finding interesting solutions, and that they can share with you. As you may know, Douglas knows because he's part of the working group, we're operating a peer learning program called Let's Connect. So Let's Connect will be very much a tool to connect people to learn from their work whilst whilst you're implementing and whilst we're analyzing these reports. How are different communities participating? Share some reflections of how you've engaged participants, particularly if you said you were working with underrepresented groups, trying to fill that gap in contributors, to understand how they're participating. And here are some of the categories of analysis that you can use. Are they, you know, because something that a lot of applicants, grantee partners have mentioned is, you know, when we just talk about number of participants, it doesn't tell the full story of our work. Like, we're creating a lot of events and activities for participants. They may not go on to edit Wikipedia or any Wikimedia project, but we have created an important impact in that they're more aware of the value of Wikimedia, or they may go on to become an organizer or help the organization or bring in new skills. So when you say we're bringing in these people, we don't only want to look at, you know, are they editors or not, but really, what are the other values of those participants that your work is bringing? You also outlined some learning priorities in your application. You said, like, these are my main learning questions. This is what I want to learn. So we would like to for you to reflect on what you're learning from that. And this is really important because sometimes we ask ourselves important questions such as, what are the key factors that help newcomers be engaged and continue to come back to activities? But we're only measuring participants in the activities or if they edit. We're not actually learning about what are those key factors that help newcomers come back. So what we want to identify with this question is, are we really collecting the data and the information that we need to answer those questions that you have? And if not, how can we work with you to think of ways to learn and answer those questions that you have about your work? We're also looking at what are the next steps on the second half of your work. And that's the first section. We then go on into the metrics. And like I've said, and I've tried to emphasize this a lot when you were applying, and again, now that we're looking at results, is do not only focus on the numbers. The numbers will only tell one picture. We need to also understand why that happened, what can we learn from it, what are we not learning yet, and what information do we need to collect. That is often considered qualitative information because it's quality of information that complements those numbers. Doesn't mean that the numbers won't be important and be used, but we need to understand those numbers more. I'll give you an example. There's some projects that say we're going to contribute 40 contents on Wiki Commons, and people might say, well, that's very little for an important amount of money. But if you look at those contents, they are, training manuals, and they're really valuable and they take a lot of work. Or they're working with students doing graphic design to find new ways of illustrating Wikipedia articles. So the quality of those contents needs to be understood and not just the number. And that's why it's important for you to include that qualitative data. So what you're going to look at in Flux is you're going to see the metrics that you defined in your application. It will come up. You will see the metric you defined automatically and the target that you set, and you will be able to fill out the information. So you'll be able to give the result of that metric, and you will be able to comment and analyze it. Again, when we talk about the metric, it doesn't need to be a number. It can be what we've learned from newcomer experience, and you write down what you're learning, and your surveys or your focus groups or your interviews or your conversations are bringing from that. So we're registering in these boxes so that we can take that information, as I said, and give a full picture of what's happening in the region. But it doesn't mean that those boxes need to only be numbers, right? And several of you defined in your applications, you defined very interesting metrics beyond the numbers. We want to learn from newcomers. We want to learn about underrepresented communities. We want to learn about innovations in Wikisource. And this is where you can register those results. So at the end of the day, you'll have a table that says the target, be it a number or be it a description, the results, the comments or analysis. Like if you didn't meet your result or it was higher than expected, you can comment on why. Or if this metric is no longer relevant, you can also comment on why it wasn't measured or why it hasn't been measured in the midterm report. And you can also add any metrics that maybe you didn't define in your proposal, but now are relevant, and you can also include them. So you're not restricted to only those that you defined in your proposal. And then you will have a space to provide information about which tool or which method you use to collect data. And you can link in here survey formats or dashboards or any tool that you might have used. The same for all the different types of metrics. And finally, this is a really important point as well. Are you having any difficulties collecting data? How can we support you in this? This is a big area. We're all learning from this. We're moving from just the numbers to more in-depth knowledge of what we're doing, and not all organizations know how to maybe apply an interview tool or a survey or a focus group or any type of qualitative tool. So if you are having those challenges, we can work with you and find simple templates, examples, and help you implement that with the resources that you have and the team that you have and the time that you have, which is always the biggest constraint. And finally, here you'll see all those spaces where you can add more information, stories of impact, any type of documents that you want. Of course, this will all be on Meta. If you don't want anything to be on Meta, then just mention it, and it will not be published. And the financial reporting is basically use the budget that you template that you worked on. I don't know if some of you use the template that we provided or your own, but using that same structure, you report what has been the spending to date, and you can annex any additional documents. So this is the general report that you will fill out. There is not a lot of character space, so the idea is really to be brief and focus on the learning. I'm going to stop there because we're already 30 minutes into the conversation, and I want to hear from you. And if we have time, I will talk about the conversations with program officers. So over to any questions you may have. I'll stop sharing my screen. Also, Jacqueline, feel free to jump in with any comments. Are there any questions? I don't think I could have been that clear that there's no question. I was probably very confusing. Douglas, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Jessica, for the overview. It was not confusing, but quite clear enough. The explanation you've given on the reporting template, it seemed to stop at the final part on financial reporting and compliance. But then there's part 4 on administration. What is required onto administration? Maybe I missed it, but I didn't see the explanation on administration, that final part. Yeah, that is the question.
Oh, thanks, Douglas. Yeah, there's just a couple of you can go on to the template as well. I'll just link it in here. This is the midterm report template. So the final part is just a compliance. So just to check some boxes that you've complied with the regulations. And the final question is what your experience as a grantee has been like. And in this report, we also want you to give us feedback about our work, where you have felt that, the support has been important or where it's been missing. What are some of the things that we're not doing so well? Maybe communication, clarity. So take this report also as a way of giving us feedback, and do so in any of the questions, but that last question as well is a space for that.
All right. Okay. Thank you for that. That's well noted.
Is there anybody on the call, and I'm sorry I don't have my database open, that are rapid fund grantees? No. all general support. Kimo, I think you have multi-year fund, am I correct? Or is it just year fund?
It's just year.
Year, okay. So you will use the midterm report and the final report as well. The final report is a similar structure. I won't go through it, so it's not so much information. We just included some more reflections about some key organizational aspects, like how you feel that your capacities are growing in both your organization, your programmatic work, not as an evaluation. Again, it's more of a way to reflect together on, where we need to support more and build more capacities. And also we included in the final report, a few more reflections about your learning and feedback for us. Is there any other question? Michael, Emmanuel, Jacqueline, you can ask questions too, or Kimo.
Jessica, I have a question.
Yeah.
So for rapid fund
Okay, from my
grantee,
end.
sorry.
That's right, Jacqueline. You can continue.
Okay, thank you. For rapid fund grantees, where their grants are approved before the 1st June, where we move on to the new application reporting template, right? So those that were approved before, they will still use the old reporting template. Is that correct?
Exactly. Only the rapid funds that have gone through the flux system to apply will use the new reporting template.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Peter. Good to have you back. Emmanuel, did you want to ask something? Okay, because we have some more time and not any questions or comments for now. I understand it's a lot of information, so feel free to take it all in, digest it, look at the documents, and then we can set up another space with Veronica and we can go through it as we did with the application as well. If you have draft templates that you want to share so we can look at them and give you feedback, please do that. Douglas.
Yeah, I just realized as I was looking back at the areas you took us through on the meta page, there's also the learning bit by the regional committees. So I'm wondering, at what point do the regional committees interface with the grantees? Because the grantees can already interface with the program officer to discuss and share feedback. But then I'm wondering, at what point do the grantees interface to share their work, or like maybe share any lessons or learnings with the thing that is also meant to happen or not?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the idea is that we're going to start having some regional learning sessions with grantee partners, with regional committee members, where we can come together and as I said, give back all this information to you. That's my role, is to analyze all this information and to be able to put it together in a way that we can learn what is happening in the region, what are grantees doing, what are some of the challenges, what are some of the early results that we're seeing, how they're learning from their work. And so the idea is that in this learning session, we can have an open conversation with other grantees and with regional committee members. That will be the first space, which will be this year, it will be at the end of August. So before the next application round. We won't have this year an analysis of the midterm reports because it's been such a large learning process for everybody. We want to give more time for people to do their reports and for us to analyze them. So we will incorporate learning from those reports next year. What we will do this year is have a learning space where we will share some information about the application proposals and what their intentions are, and some of the financing data, like where money is going, how it's being distributed. And then you can use that space with regional committee members to discuss, what is happening in the region, what are the opportunities. So it's like a higher level discussion about everybody's work, not just like one grantee's work. But that will be an opportunity to share examples of what's happening in your work in Uganda. And then the idea is that during the funding round, we manage to create as many spaces as possible for grantees to have more interaction with regional committee members. This has been something that grantees have asked for, and also regional committee members have asked for. It's just difficult to fit it in the timing to have one-on-one spaces with regional committee members. But we're going to try to find a way, maybe in groups, where whilst they're reviewing your proposals, there will be a chance to talk and discuss a bit more the work that you're doing. So there'll be those two moments, end of August, and then as we go into the round in September, October, November. Was that clear, Douglas? All right, thanks. Okay, so I will take just a few minutes to talk about the conversations you're going to have with program officers in your region. The person responsible for this conversation is the program officer. So they will be filling out this report on Flux, this learning conversation on Flux. But you can also have access to it. So if there's anything that has been registered that you want to add to or edit, you can do that as well. So it's for both of you to work on, but it's the program officer's responsibility to document this and to invite you to this conversation. So the idea, here's some general information about why this conversation. And this is, as I mentioned throughout the presentation, the idea here is really to go deeper into understanding your work and learning from it. So we don't want you just to tell us, all these other activities that we did. We've read your report, we've analyzed it, we have these questions that we'd like to ask, or we want to know more about this work that you're doing that's really interesting. And this is the moment we can talk about it. So things like, what are the signs that you're of progress that you're most excited about? Would you give us some examples of stories that you would like to share? Are there any activities that you're finding challenging? Like, what are you hoping to do to address them? You won't be repeating things that you've said in your report. The idea is that the program officer will bring examples from your report to be able to discuss them in more detail. If you find that you are repeating what you've already said in your report, but verbally, then we failed. Say that's not the idea of the conversation. But as I said in the beginning, we're experimenting. So any feedback after you've gone through this process of how we can improve these conversations and the analysis that we do of your reports, then please let us know, and there'll be spaces to receive that feedback. We want to talk a little bit about the team structure, the capacity that you've had to implement your work, where you feel that maybe you're having difficulties with volunteer time, with burnout, with the need for more staff. or more roles. We really want to focus on innovation. Is there anything that you are, let's talk about some of your innovations. Again, going into understanding what difficulties or interesting things that you're doing with data collection, and that's it. So there's six areas. Not all the questions will be asked. It depends a lot on your report and on the things that the conversation brings. It's an open conversation. So it may just be one question. It may just be talking about one aspect. The important thing is that we can learn from it and we can share that knowledge with other people. That's it for me. So now I'm leaving it open for any comments, or else we can all take 10 minutes to have a coffee. I'm going to also stop recording now.